Okay, good morning. We are on Lamed Ches Amid Aleph at the bottom, last lines, 38a. We have seen in the Mishnah that a machlokes, in the Gemara explaining the Mishnah, machlokes of whether or not you're allowed to return food that was on the stove before Shabbos. That was Beis Shammai says that you cannot return food, only hot water, and Beis Hillel said that you can only leave hot water, and you cannot return it. Beis Hillel say that you can even return it, and machlokes of whether you're originally allowed to have kept food that was cooking before Shabbos at certain, and some of it it's somewhat cooked to continue its cooking process into Shabbos. But in order to return foods on Shabbos, you would have to have, the Mishnah says, a condition that either you've raked out the coals or you've covered the coals. And we saw in Rashi that diminishes the heat, and therefore you won't want to continue the cooking process, or it reminds you not to fan the flames by having covered the heat source itself. Now we're going to see other conditions as to when you're allowed to return food on Shabbos. So the food was on the stove before Shabbos. You took it off to serve someone or some other reason that you took the food off on Shabbos, and you want to return the food. The first condition the Mishnah makes is that the heat source is covered or removed. Now we're going to see some more conditions. Beis Hillel say you can even return the food back to the stove. Amar Rav Shai says, according to the opinion that says you're allowed to return the food, afilu b'Shabbos. That's even on Shabbos. Rashi says, what does it mean even on Shabbos? Even on Shabbos day, not only Friday night. That's where Beis Hillel says it's permissible to put it back, where it's clear when you remove the food, you're going to want to put it back because you want to have the food for Shabbos day as well. But even when you took it off Shabbos morning or Shabbos lunchtime, where at that point the assumption is you're not going to want to put it back, nevertheless you're allowed to put it back. Tues has a different interpretation. So nevertheless, you can put it back even on Shabbos itself. And Rabbi Shai also says you can return it even on Shabbos day. Rabbi Shai says, we were once standing in front of the Rabbi the elder. They brought up hot water for him from the fire, which was in the lower level of the house, and they brought it up to the upper level. And they filled in his cup. And they brought the hot water pot back to the fire on the lower level. So you see, and he didn't say anything to us. So you see that you're allowed to return it even on Shabbos itself. Amar Rabbi Zirka, Rabbi Tudai. This is only true if the food is the pot and the food is still in his hand. However, if you put it down on the floor, you can no longer put it back on the pot, on the stove. And the reason is because once you put it down on the floor, you've indicated that you no longer want to put it back. At this point, you're done with the cooking process. To put it back on the stove is now going to begin to look as if he's doing the cooking from the start, or he's as Rashi says, he's insulating it again by letting it hang in the stove. Either way, the idea is that once he's put it down, so much so that it's sitting on the floor, it looks, when he puts it back on, it's going to look like an initial act of cooking or atmana, and that can't be done on Shabbos. But while it's still in his hand, that's going to be okay. The Gemara left out an in-between case, which is if he put it on the counter or the table. It says if it's still in his hand, or if it's on the ground. But what about if it's on the table? The Shulchan Aruch deals with that. I just want to point out that the Gemara leaves that one out. But according to Rabbi Tzvi, it must still be in his hand. It can't be on the ground. Rabbi Tzvi, the Garmeu David. Rabbi Tzvi is a single opinion. The majority disagree with him. Rather, this is what Rabbi Yochanan says. Even if you put it on the ground already, as long as he intends to put it back, that's going to be sufficient. One said, one said, indeed, if you put it down on the ground, it's going to be prohibited to put it back. You can only put it back on the stove if it's still in your hands. And the other said, like he said, Ravami said in the name of Rabbi Barabba, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that even if it's still in his hand, even if you put it on the ground, it doesn't have to still be in his hand. It's going to be permissible to put it back. This that we said that it's still in his hand, he's allowed to put it back. Has to be that his intent was to put it back. So he took it off with intent to put it back, and his intent is for it to go back. It's still in his hand. Then it's permissible. But even if it's still in his hand, if he never intended to put it back, it's not. He can't put it back. But if his intent was never or isn't to put it back, usher, then it's prohibited to put it back, even though it's still in his hand. Which would indicate that if you put it on the ground, since you say that if it's still in your hand, you also need the condition of intent. That means if it's on the ground, then we said that you can no longer put it back. That's even if you had the intent, because it's the equivalent to in your hands. We said in your hands, you could put it back. On the ground, you can no longer put it back. And we're defining now as in your hands as having the additional condition of you also wanting to put it back, intending to put it back. So now you have a double requirement. You have to intend, and it's still in your hand. But if you put it on the ground, even though you were intending, it's not going to be good. But there are those that say no, that this what Chizkiah said it goes the other way around. This that we said that it's on the ground, you cannot put it back on. That's only if you didn't have the intent to do hachazara, to put it back on the stove. But if you had the intent to put it back, mutter, it's permissible to put it back, mechlal. And therefore, when we said that you could put it back if it's still in your hands, even if you had no intent to put it back, mutter, you're allowed to put it back. So what we have now is two opinions as to what Abaye was saying. Chizkiah said in the name of Abaye. What we have clear is that you need an intent to have put it back, and or you need it's still in your hand, and then you're allowed to put it back. What the Gemara did not define is if it's on a counter. It only made the qualification that it can't be put on the ground. The Mishnah already said the condition is that it has to be that it is that the heat source is covered or removed, right? Gerufa Ketuma. So it has to be Gerufa Ketuma still in his hand with intent to put it back. What the Gemara did not define for us is two conditions that the Shulchan Aruch says. One is, how cooked does the food have to be to put it back on the stove on Shabbos? It's on a blech, so the heat source is covered. I took it off. It's still in my hands, and I intend to put it back. If it's not fully cooked, can I put it back? So Shulchan Aruch says no. Another condition is that it still has to be hot. It still has to have heat. So if I took it off and I'm holding it, but I'm holding it for I don't know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it cooled down, can I put it back? There too, the answer would be no. So it has these 5 conditions. Heat source has to be covered, still in my hand. Intent was to put it back. It was fully cooked, and it is still hot.
But the still in your hand, and I think I asked you a question about this once, but let's say, for instance, the pot's all, I don't know, everything rolled over, boiled over, whatever. The pot's dirty. You don't want to put it on a nice tablecloth. You put it on the ground because that's the only place you've got to put it. Because you have to make an arrangement or do something, but you fully intend to put it back. I mean, what I'm understanding is putting it on the floor is like that's a hecker that I'm done. I'm not putting it back.
Well, that's the two versions of Abai. In the first version of Abai, the Gemara says that even if you intend to put it back, if you put it on the ground, you can't return it. The second version says that if you had if you had intent to put it back, so then even if you put it on the ground, it's going to be okay. It's either or. Either it's still in your hand, or you have intent to put it back. And according to that version, you'd be allowed to put it back on the stove, even if you put it on the ground, because your intent was to put it back. And l'chatchila, you should not put it on the ground. If you did, you couldn't put it back in if that was your intent.
The halacha l'maaseh, you could.
That's what I'm saying. If you
had das to put it back,
and you it's best not to put it on the ground. If you did, you can still put it back.
If you had das.
Of course, if you intended, yeah. Gemara now asks, what about the cases that we were talking about before that are not included here? It said put it on the ground or it's still in your hand. What about if you put it on the table? You put it on the bed. You put it. You threw it over your shoulder. Or if you poured it into a second pot, what would be the halacha? Teku, these are not answered. And when you poured it from one pot to the next, by putting it into the second pot, now you've cooled it to the degree that if you put it back on the stove, you may come to fan the flames because it's not as hot as it was. But from the Gemara's question, the post can find that since Rabbi Yirmiyah asked a question which wasn't answered, which was if you threw it over your shoulder on your walking stick, or you put it on a bed, that's where it maybe acts as the floor. But if you put it on the counter or table, which is a normal place to put a pot that you took off the stove in order to put it back, there clearly you would be allowed to put back the stove, the food on the stove. The postscript nevertheless say keep a hand on it, so this way you're showing intent to put it back and it's still in your hand. So that's the end of the oven that we call a kira, which is a rectangular 2-stove wood stove. We now have 2 other stoves that we're going to get introduced to, which I mentioned last time, the tanor, which is a upside down cone shaped oven. It has a door in the front, and because of its cone shape, it retains heat in a greater way. And so, and then also a single stove, rectangular stove. So tanor sheziku b'kasha b'gvava, a tanor, which is this cone-shaped oven, which you used even a heat source that burns itself out quickly, like straw. You cannot put food, whether you put it on the inside, whether you put it on top of it. You cannot put food, and so the put food over here would be either initially, and meaning to leave the food on to continue cooking from before Shabbos. You cannot do that, or according to the opinion Techanan, you cannot return the food because the food is too hot. It's too much of the heat source is too strong. You cannot put food back on Shabbos. Even if you took it out, you can't put it back. Kupach shasikua bekasha b'gvava. What about a kupach? A kupach is a single rectangular stove, the same as the kira, only that it's one. It only has one a single stove, a single pot space. Areza kikirayim. So if you use straw, which burns itself up, it has the same rule as kirayim, as a kira, and therefore you're allowed to return food there or leave it on initially. The two versions of how to read the previous Mishnah. The gefas of eitzim, however, if you use a strong heat source, here too, it's going to have a stronger retention of its heat. And hareu ketaner, it's like a tanner oven, and you cannot return food to it, or you cannot leave the food on it. And even though the kasha vava really burns itself out, the straw burns itself out and in the tanner, and nevertheless you can't put it back. So the same would be over here. You cannot put the food back into the oven by a kupach if you used a strong heat source such as wood or sediment. The Gemara explains: Tana shesikua sover of Yosef l'meimar teicha mamish al gaba mamish. Rabbi Yosef thought that when in our Mishnah it says you can't put something in or above, it meant you can't put something into the oven. As the simple reading, can't put anything into the oven, you can't put anything on the oven. Aval lismach shaper dummy. But we had a third question in the Gemara that the Mishnah didn't introduce, but the Gemara introduced earlier, which was, can I put food on the side of the oven in order to heat? Now that I'd be allowed to do. Abaye challenged him. Kupach shasikur bekasha begvava. What about a kupach? If you heated it with straw, then it's like a kirayim, areki kirayim, and you're allowed to return the food there. Gefas of eitzim. But if you heated your kupach with wood or with grape sediment or olive sediment, with the sediment that is, these are strong heat sources that last and act as a good fuel. Hareyuka tanner, then it's like a tanner, and I'm not allowed to return the food there. V'aser. Now, hakikira shari, but in like a kira would be permissible, meaning that since it says it's like a tanner, then I can't do what is permissible to I can't do on a kira the same as I cannot do for a tanner. But if it was permissible, it would be permissible like a kira. What would have been permissible? Hakikira shari. B'mai. What would be permissible here? What are we talking about? B'mai is king. Ilim al gabav. Are we talking about on it? Or b'mai? What's the Mishnah didn't tell us what is the scenario? Did I cover the heat? Did I shovel out the wood? If we're talking about that it still has the heat source in there, well, I can't return it to a kira either. Even the original Mishnah, the first Mishnah, also told me if I didn't remove the heat source, I can't put the food back on there. That can't be. Even the kira oven, I can't put the food back on if I didn't remove the heat source or if I didn't cover it. Elalav lismach must be, the case is that I'm leaning it on the side, and yet the Mishnah tells me that I cannot lean it on the side of the kira. Even though I can lean it on the side of a kira, I cannot lean it on the side of the kupach because it has more heat, because it's a smaller rectangle. And yet it says it's like an oven, the tanner oven, which I cannot lean the food on the side. So the Gemara is deducing from the fact that the Mishnah didn't tell us in our case that we're talking about now, in the single oven, a single stove oven, the kupach, it didn't tell us that I had to have removed the heat source. We're talking about that the heat source is still there. And in a kira, I'd be allowed to put the food back, but for a kupach, I cannot. Now, what case is that? That the heat source is not covered, and yet I can return the food. The only time that is I can lean it not on the stove, but next to the stove on the side, and yet for a kupach, it's prohibited. Says, no, you're making a mistake. Our Mishnah is talking about, we've already established in the previous Mishnah that it has to be that you remove the heat source. Our Mishnah is talking about that case, that you already removed the heat source, either by covering it or by shoveling it out. And yet, even though you remove the heat source, in a tanner, you can never put something on it, you can never put something in it. It retains too much heat. All right, and the kupach as well. If you used a strong heat source, such as wood or sediment, you cannot, even though you've removed the heat source, you cannot put the food back on the stove itself. The alpha gav, the karavakotim al gav of usr, even though you remove the heat source, you shoveled it out or you covered it, nevertheless you can't put the food back on the oven. The ikakira grufa kikrufa ktuma shabadam. But if it were like a kira, once you've shoveled it out, it would be sufficient and permissible. So the conclusion here is this: if you have this, the first oven we have, which is a kira, a double oven, a double stove oven, there, if you've removed the heat source, you put the food back on. So you covered it or shoveled it out, you can put the food back on. By a tanur, even if your heat source was a diminishing heat source, such as hay, straw, nevertheless, and it burns itself out, you cannot put food back on that stove on Shabbos, even though you shoveled it out. And the same goes for a kupach. If you use the heat source, a good heat source of wood. If you use a weak heat source like straw, hay, then you can put it back on the kupach, the single rectangular oven, but not on the tan. So we have a brisa that tells us like Abaya. Tana shasikua. Tanner shasikua bekasha b'gvava. If you have a tanner, which is again the cone-shaped, very hot oven, even though your fuel was straw, ein samchala, you cannot lean a pot on its side. Ve'ein tzarich lemer agabav, and for sure you cannot lean something. You can't put something on top of it. Ve'ein tzarich lemer l'toicha, and for sure not into it. And for sure not if you use the heat source of a proper heat source like wood or sediment. In other words, in a tanner, you can't do anything. Kupach, what about a kupach, which is a rectangular single pot stove? If you heated it with a weak heat source that burns itself up like straw, then you can lean something on its side. And you can't put something on top of it, which the gra changes to v'nos agabav. You're allowed to put on top of it. However, begefas of eitzit, if your heat source was wood, ein samchalai, there you can't even lean it on its side, and this is the support to Abaye, that in that when the Mishnah said you cannot kupach, which is a single stove, a single pot stove for rectangular shape, that if you heated it with proper heat, such as wood, not only can you not put something in it or on it, but you can't even put it on its side next to it. So what is this kupach that I've been explaining to you? What is it? Ika kira, if it's shaped and acts like a kira, so then the halacha should be like a kira, that even if it has a wood source for fuel, it should be permissible to put it back on. And if it acts like a tanur, even if you heated it with straw, it should not be permissible to put it back. No, it's in between. It acts less, it retains less heat than the tanur, but more heat than the kira. What is it? And now what's its shape? A kupach only can fit one pot. Kira makim shvisa steikaderis, but a kira can fit two pots. We have a brisa like that. Kira shenechlaka la'orcha tahor la'rachba tameh. If you split a kira, it broke and it split vertically horizontally, tahara. It's going to be tahara because it's no longer a functional oven. However, l'rachba, if it split vertically, tamei, it's going to be tamei. Kupach bein l'arka bein l'rachba tar. But a kupach, both vertically or horizontally, is going to be tar. It's no longer functioning. So we see what's the distinction. Vertically on a kira, you still have a single oven that is functional because it's side by side. Whereas for a kupach, regardless whether you split it vertically or horizontally, it no longer has any oven structure, and therefore it's going to be tar. It's no longer a vessel. Mishnah continues. Here we begin with actually cooking on Shabbos. Up until now, we were talking about shehiyah, leaving food on the oven, on the stove from before Shabbos to continue cooking. And once it's cooked and you're taking it off on Shabbos to return it. What about putting food into a heat source on Shabbos itself? So the Mishnah says, even if you're putting something that is not on directly on a stove, but you're putting it next to, and not on the stove, but next to something that's cooking. So I have a pot of hot water on the stove, and I take an egg and I put it next to the pot to become a soft-boiled egg by the heat from the side of the pot. I want it to become hardened. Or leif cannabis sudrin. I also cannot just make a sunny side up. I'm going to split an egg onto a hot source, something that has been heated, such as a kerchief or something that was out in the sun. Now it's hot, and I put an egg on it. I can't do that. Rabbi Yossi Matir. Rabbi Yossi says you can. And the Gemara is going to talk about something called Toldas Chama. The concept is if something is cooking directly in the sun, so I take an egg and I put it directly in the sun, and the sun is going to heat it, that's going to be permissible. That is a natural source of heat and is permissible to continue to heat something with that, to cook something with that on Shabbos. In other words, even though the food is cooking, I'm not cooking it. It's not considered my cooking. However, Toldas Chama, something that has heated on account of the sun. So it's a very hot day, and I walk out to my car, and the hood of my car is hot, and I take an egg and I crack it onto the hood, and it cooks there. That would be prohibited on Shabbos of cooking because I'm utilizing something even that is hot in this world. It's not from outer space. It's not that a separate heat source. And so Toldas Chama, and Toldas Chama is going to be Aser Midorabanan. Rabbi Yossi says no, that's not going to be Aser. Sorry?
So why is it okay for people to take stuff out of the fridge and sit it on top of a cholent pot on Shabbos to warm up?
Great. We're going to get to more of that, but here I'm not taking, first of all, that food is already cooked. Our Mishnah is dealing with food that is not cooked yet. I'm taking a raw egg. You're asking about something that is cooked already. So I'm taking my kugel, a quiche, something like that, a challah. So all these are already cooked. They're fully cooked, and I'm putting them on, not on the stove. I'm putting them on a pot that is cooked. So it's a pot on top of a pot. That's an abnormal way of reheating. So it's not on the heat source. It doesn't look like I'm cooking something from the start because you can't really cook something that way. And I'm not cooking. I'm actually just reheating. Our Mishnah is talking about where I'm taking something raw and I'm trying to cook it on Shabbos. When does that cooking count as mine?
Also, our Mishnah is talking about, it's from what I understand, our Mishnah is not talking about, so far it doesn't sound like it's talking about solids. I mean, if talking about water, heating up water, water is a liquid, it's not a solid.
Our Mishnah is talking about an egg.
Well, I mean, but a raw egg.
And
it's not solid. It's not cooked. It's not.
Oh,
I'm agreeing with what you're saying. I'm not arguing with you.
The Mishnah means the same for a potato. I couldn't take a raw potato and put it there either.
Yeah. Okay.
So the
But it has
distinction
to,
is that it's raw and I'm starting the cooking process.
but I thought that there was also a distinction. Like if I have
Right,
a broth,
we haven't gotten to reheating. We haven't gotten to reheating something, liquid or solid. That's what you're talking about. But our Mishnah, the primary distinction here is our Mishnah is talking about something that's still raw, and I want to cook it from the start. Or maybe I started cooking already before Shabbos, but it's still raw. It's not edible yet. But the Mishnah is saying that if I'm using a heat source, even if that heat source started from the sun, so I heated the hood of my car got hot from the sun, but now I have something hot here that I'm going to cook on, is also going to be prohibited. Rabbi Yossi says that's permissible. I also can't take the egg and I put it into hot sand in order to cook. Or dust on the path, in order to cook. The Gemara continues with the story of the people of Tiberia, and the Gemara is going to tell us two versions of which part of the Mishnah it's responding to. So we know in Tiberias, in Tiberia, there are the hot springs. Natural hot springs are very hot. They're over 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And so they took a pipe of cold water and they brought it through the hot springs, according to Rashi, in order to heat that cold water up, and then they can have fresh water bath on Shabbos. So the Chachamim said to those people that brought this tube through, this pipe through, in Shabbos, if you did this on Shabbos, not you did it on Shabbos, but the water that comes through on Shabbos, that's water that became cooked on Shabbos. You can't bathe in it and you can't drink it. In Yontif, and if the water cooked on Yontif, it's like hot water that cooked on Yontif, which you're not allowed to use for bathing, but you are allowed to drink. So the Gemara asks a question. What happens if you did cook it this way? That's seemingly the question of it. If you did use this and you cook this egg in the sun, you cook the egg next to a pot, what happens? Does that count as real cooking? Amar Rav Yosef Gilgal Chayev. If you did so, yes, it's a proper cooking of food. You took raw food, even though you didn't cook it directly in a pot. You cooked it by putting it next to a boiling pot. That's going to be chayev. It's going to is a biblical transgression of cooking on Shabbos, and you're going to be chayev to bring a chatas, a sin offering. We have a brayso like that as well. We're now on Lama Tes Amud Aleph, 39a. Kol shaba bechamin milafnei haShabbos shor noise bechamin b'Shabbos. Anything that was already cooked beforehand, that had come into hot water prior to Shabbos, you can soak it in hot water on Shabbos. They would make salted fish or something like that, and it was already partially brined and cooked before Shabbos, so you can put it into hot water on Shabbos. But something that had not yet had hot water on it on Shabbos, so you can rinse off quickly the salt, the brine on Shabbos with some hot water, but only that. But you cannot actually put it into hot water because that's going to continue the cooking. That will complete the cooking process. And even this quick rinse on hot water, the pour over, can also not be done in certain circumstances. This too may not be done in the circumstances of something that has been jerky, where the salt really salted it for a long time, and kulyas upon it, and also something that another type of fish or something that was soaking. Because it completes the cooking process immediately, even just rinsing it, and that will be considered cooking. This is called a kali habishul, something that cooks quickly, that even pouring over it will not be okay. Shmamina, indeed, we see that all this is talking about that that if it's not cooked or the hot water is going to cook it, that's going to be considered a cooking on Shabbos and prohibited. It also says that even something that has been heated in the sun, you cannot use as to fry your egg. Batanan, and this that we learn, this that we learn, you cannot, that you are allowed to put food into a pot, into a pit, and in cold water in order to keep it fresh. So that's the way they would store their food. The food that you cooked. So any food that you want to put into a pit in order to maintain its heat or maintain its freshness. So you're allowed to put it into a pit, or cold water in the sun. If you have cold water and you want a hot drink, so you're going to take your pot out and let it sit in the sun and let it heat. So the first part is really just like their refrigerating system. But the second part is their heating system. They would take a pot of water and put it out in the sun to let the sun beat on it and warm it up. Lema Rabbi Yossi, so maybe this is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, he says you're allowed to do it. And not the first opinion. No, everybody agrees. You're allowed to utilize the sun and heat up your water, your food. That's not going to be considered cooking. But told us something that heated from fire, such as your stove, the side of your stove or the side of your pot. There, the heat source was a earthly fire. That's prohibited. Keep ligi, but told us the machlokas is about your car hood, something that was heated by the sun, but is no longer directly heated by the sun. You're not cooking in the sun, you're cooking on something that was heated from the sun. Or one says that just like a metal pot that was heated by your stove, you can't cook an egg on the side of it or on it. So too, a metal heated by the sun, you cannot cook something on it because you're now cooking on something that is tangible in our world, and people will compare the two. And one says no. Rabbi Yossi says anything heated by the sun, you're allowed to heat on. Yet the Mishnah said you cannot take an egg and hide it and envelop it in the hot sand in order to cook it. But yet Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah doesn't disagree. Why not? So Rabba says the reason is maybe if you're going to be allowed to put an egg into sand, hot sand, you're going to put it into hot ash, hot coals, and that's a very equivalent in people's eyes. Hot sand, hot ash, and hot ash is actually a physical fire. Rabbi Yossi says a different reason. It's a muktzah reason or a plowing reason, because you're going to either dig around the hole in the sand in order to put the egg in or to take it out, and that is digging. Rashi says it's like plowing, and Tues says because of a muktzah, you're now moving sand, which is not something that you've separated for Shabbos, and so it has no function on Shabbos. It's muktzah. We're not going to get into it, but this gets into the concept of moving something by its side, meaning indirectly moving it. By pulling out the egg, the sand falls in. Is that considered my moving the sand? We'll get more into that later. So, Mipnei Shemez is because I'm going to move the sand or digging. My benayu. What distinction is there between these two reasons? What about it's thick, dense sand where it's and somewhat wet, where therefore when I dig into it, it's not going to move any of the sand. It already has the indentation, perhaps, but it's hot. The Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, we ask a question from a statement of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. You're allowed to heat an egg on a hot roof, but not on hot lime or plaster. So it makes sense, according to the first opinion, that maybe you're going to put it into hot ash, like a mixer. So on a roof, there's no reason to be concerned about that because nobody puts hot ash on a roof. But according to the second reason, that maybe I'm going to put it into if I put it in the ground, I may actually move the dirt, and it'll either be considered digging, or it'll be considered that I'm muktzah, I'm moving the eggs, the sand. Ligzar stam. Why are we not concerned on a roof? And where it says stam gag less ba'afer, we don't have to be concerned because usually a roof does not have earth on it. A roof, you don't have offer on it, you don't have topsoil on it. Tashema. So we're going to try and prove it from our Mishnah. We had a scenario where the people of Tiberia brought this cold water pipe through the hot springs in order to heat it. So according to the first opinion, that says the reason why Rabbi Yossi was concerned and agreed to the prohibition of putting an egg into hot sand is because maybe you're going to put it into hot ash, and that's an actual fire heat source. Well, that would make sense. The same reason he said he agreed to not put a pipe through the hot springs, because that too, somebody may put it into hot water. It says it's similar to putting a pot of hot water into hot water to maintain its heat. But according to the second opinion, Rabbi Yosef, that said that the concern over here of putting an egg into the sand is maybe I'm going to move maybe I'm going to dig or move the sand, and it's a muktzah. My why would the Mishnah compare the story of the people in Tiberias bringing the hot water through the hot springs? Why? How is that comparable to the case of putting an egg into the sand? And where it says no, you think the story was in relation to to putting the egg in the sand? No, Misavris Ma'aseh Tveria. The Mishnah is bringing the story Aseifa in relation to the egg in the sand. No, that's not the reason we brought it. Areishakai, it's talking about the first case, which says that you can't put an egg near a urn on the flames, on the fire. And there it said, don't crack an egg and heat it on the hood of your car, on something that's heated in the sun. Rabbi Yossi matir, and that Rabbi Yossi says is permissible. Rabbanan said to Rabbi Yossi, how can you say that's permissible? The story of the hot water from Tiberias, that's also not a natural thing. That's not, even though it's natural in the sense that it happens in our world, but it's not a fire we have access to. And therefore, Toldos Chamo, it's the same as something that's heated by the sun. The hot springs there are also heated by a divine form of heat, not a earthly man-made heat. And yet, the Chachamim said you're not allowed to bring the cold water in a pipe through the hot water. No, that is considered a human type of heat. The Chalfia Pislet Gehenim, it passes through the opening of Gehenim. The heat source, as the Meiri says, is inside the core of the earth, and therefore that's an earthly fire, and therefore the hot water that comes from an earthly fire counts as earthly fire, and therefore the Chachamim prohibited it. But if you have the hood of your car, which is heated by the sun, you're allowed to crack an egg on that and cook it. Tomorrow, let's just do one more line. Amar of Chistam, and we turn the page. Lamates Amid Beis. Memaisa she'asa an Seitveria va'asilu Rabbanon batla hatmana. From this story that the Chachamim said that the people of Tiberia were not allowed to bring this cold water pipe through the hot water, you can no longer do hatmana, which means insulating something in a substance, but davar musav hevel, in a substance that is a conductor of heat, which adds heat to the food that you have. And even if you did it before Shabbos, and it just continues adding heat to it on Shabbos, you can't do so. Ula says, by the way, the halacha is not like the Chachamim. The Anshe Tveria, what they did was right. They were allowed to do it. It's too bad. They already broke their pipe. Meaning he's saying, no, the Chachamim were right, and the halacha is already established that you cannot heat with something that is a earthly heat source. Even if you put the pipe in before Shabbos, if it continues to heat on Shabbos, you're not allowed to use that water. And we'll continue with the story of Tveria and the waters heated on Shabbos tomorrow. Tomorrow morning. Sorry, after Yom.